Conformity and compliance. It's all around education. In this episode, I have some brain food for you to consider. Is your teaching style more conformity or is it compliance?
This is a Lazy Teacher Podcast.
Welcome back to the Lazy Teacher Podcast. My name is Brian Pulowski. This is episode 56, Conformity versus Compliance. So let's just jump right into it. According to encyclopedia.com, conformity is a change in behavior or belief toward a group standard as a result of the group's influence on an individual. Conformity is a type of social influence through which group members come to share similar beliefs and standards of behavior. So we can kind of think about it like a baseball team. If I'm on a baseball team because I really like the team, or I support a baseball team because I really love that team and I want them to win and I stand behind them, that would be conformity because I'm conforming to the belief of the team and what they want and I'm a part of it. I wholeheartedly believe in it. That would be conformity. Versus compliance is a behavioral conformity in order to achieve rewards or avoid punishments. One can behaviorally adhere to a group standard without personally believing in it. Compliance often refers to the request or demand of another, especially an authority. So going back to our baseball analogy for that example, for compliance, I might like being on that team just because I'm getting the reward of getting to play baseball, or I'm getting social acceptance from being on that team. But when I go home, I don't really care that much about the team. I can care less if they win, or if I support the team, I'm only supporting them because, I don't know, my friends support them and I want to watch a game or something like that. That would be compliance. Conformity is a fundamental social process without which people would be unable to organize into groups and take effective action as a group whole. For people to coordinate their behavior so that they can organize and work together as a group, they must develop and adhere to standards of behavior that make each other's actions mutually predictable. So you basically have to kind of know what to expect from the members in your group. A real example, a good example of this would be driving down a street would be nearly impossible if most people did not conform to the group norms that organize driving. Stop at this sign, go on this color light. You get the idea. Conformity is a natural behavior. People need and want to belong to social groups. Versus again, compliance, which is a survival technique to earn rewards or avoid punishment, right? So let's take a little brief history of education. Around the 1800s, there was something called the Prussian model of education. And the Prussian model of education, this started, before it was kind of like a mix of kids and whatever. And the Prussian model of education came up with, let's group kids by age. So if you picture it like almost like a conveyor belt with baskets, you start with this basket has, this is going to be our age 7 kids. And then they move on. Now there are age 8 kids and we have a new basket of age 7s. They go down the conveyor belt and there's a new basket with those kids and they just, and that's the Prussian model of education, grouping by age. We still do that. About 40 years later, a man named Horace Mann moves from what was, used to be Prussia, is now Germany, but regardless. So Horace Mann brings that model to the U.S. And that was very significant because, like I said, prior to that, it was just kind of like a mix of ages, and that really helped out with education, was grouping by age. So Horace Mann brings the Prussian model over to the U.S. in the 1840s. In around 1892, we have the birth of standardized education. And this is huge. This is, again, still taught to this day. And it's what gets taught and when. You know how standardized testing is, or standardized curriculum is. It's, arithmetic can be taught at this time. Physics is going to be taught at this age. About around that time in the US, you have something called the Industrial Revolution, and it's a huge boom in the US. Coincidentally, in the 1900s, just 8 years after the birth of standardized education, we have something called the industrialized education. It's a system that's still in place today. It's an educational system that, in its very structure, it simulated this new world in the US with the Industrial Revolution. The whole idea of assembling masses of students, which are our raw material, to be processed by teachers, the workers in the factory, and a centrally located school, the factory. And this, at the time, was a stroke of industrial genius. Children marched from place to place and sat in assigned stations. Bells rang to announce changes of time. At the tone of a bell, students were taught to line up in a straight line that must be silent. See, what you have to understand is, in an industrial factory, a line that's not straight is unsafe. There's numerous machines and limited space to safely navigate and move around the factory from one location to another. So you had to be in a straight line. And of course, silent, because you're in a very loud environment with all these machines where at any time you must be able to hear some demands, or you have to hear the moving machinery. This was all set up to train our future factory workers, the expectations of what they'd have when they grew up. Does this sound familiar to you? It should, because most classrooms and schools still follow this same model from over 100 years ago. So it should sound familiar, but that is going to be for another episode. For now, I only ask that you consider a few things as you enter into your classroom next time. Am I putting too much stress and emphasis into requiring compliance for the mere sake of wanting them to follow my rules? Or are the rules and procedures I ask in my classroom teaching conformity to school and society norms? Another example of that would be, maybe my students, when they're at home, just yell out when they want to say something. That's understandable. They're in a small group environment. So maybe we're teaching conformity to, when you're in this social environment of 30 students, 60 students, however many students you have. Socially, there needs to be a protocol and there needs to be procedures to be recognized when you want to participate in class. That being some sort of signal that you want to talk, i.e. raise your hand, whatever it is. That would be conformity versus, maybe something in your classroom that's compliant. I don't want to give you examples of compliant. I'm sure you can internalize that, and that's what I want you to think about. What in your class are you doing? What are you doing in your school, in your classroom, that it's merely just compliant? There's really no other reason. We mentioned lines. There's lines everywhere. There's lines at the grocery store. There's lines at the movie theater, amusement park, everywhere. But did you know there's only 3 places where straight and silent lines are required? Education system, the military, and the prison system. Now, I'm not telling you what to do, but let's think back. We're still teaching at a model over 100 years old. There's the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe there's some broken pieces that we can fix. Just some brain food for you guys to think about. If you haven't already, check this show out on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching it right now on YouTube. And if you are, solid, rate, review, comment, definitely subscribe to the show. Everything's a video from here on out. Super stoked. I appreciate you guys checking in. I hope you got what you came for. See ya!